One of the things we see at this setup is that it's kind of old-fashioned in a way. The modern setup, the hands are a little more out towards the chin, and the spine isn't bent over quite so far. And we've discovered that's biomechanically more efficient. So we'd like to see is for him to get his hands out a little bit, and his spine, instead of at about 50 degrees like he is now, up to 40 or even as little as 30 degrees. He's got great leg angle, but he's in a position that's going to make it hard for him to rotate as easily as he could. So we're going to try to get his hands kind of more out on this angle out here, so his hands are a little higher. Okay. So let's watch the forward part of the swing, back part of the swing. He's going to do a little waggle, get himself comfortable. And he's going to move into the backswing. And you see what he does? He has a tendency to lift the club up with his hands. So his hands have moved a long ways, and his shoulder hasn't turned much at all. So he's actually swinging pretty high above the swing plane. What I'd like to see him do is try to rotate back by turning the chest back, more of what we call a one-piece takeaway. So right now there's one piece of the takeaway, and now he's going to go to the second piece of the takeaway. And what happens is he doesn't quite get enough wrist hinge. What he does do really well from this position right here is reroute the club back to the inside. Watch the head of the club drop to the inside. He's working it in so it becomes parallel with the trail arm. That's a very classic position right there, very good. I would like to see a little bit more right knee moving towards the target at this point, but really isn't a bad swing at all. Move on through the shot. His knee's a little late. Turns through the shot very nicely, good impact, and a good exit. So work a little bit on getting your hands a little higher at setup, maybe not bend over to 50 degrees. Think about aiming your spine somewhere between 1 and 130 on the clock, and I think your swing is going to improve. This golfer is doing a little bit of the Mo Norman single plane swing. That's where the shaft and the arms are almost on a straight line. See that? It could actually be a little higher if he wanted to, up to this point right there. But he's at this line right there. We'll see how he does on his swing. The other thing that I think would make it a little easy for him is he doesn't have to bend over quite so much with his knees. He could straighten his knees, which would get his spine a little more tilted. He's got way too much flex in the knees. But let's go ahead and watch the takeaway, see what happens. Club goes back, see, under that line a little too far, but he should get right back on plane at the top. There he is. He's right on plane. Now, from this point, he can just take that club straight back down that yellow line. He should have a straight ball flight with a reasonable amount of power. Let's see what happens. See how he does that? That's the blessing of natural golf, that you can bring that club straight down that yellow line, release it, still on the yellow line. Then when he exits, he should exit on the yellow line, but he doesn't quite exit enough. We need to get him to go ahead and let that club follow through. So straighten your knees a little bit so you get a little bit more power into the swing, and then try to keep the club on that yellow line on the way back too. Great job on the way through though, buddy. Okay, we see a pretty good setup right here. Spine angle at 40 degrees was about where it should be. The hands are down under the chin, kind of a little ways away from his body, so it should have a nice comfortable takeaway. That looks pretty good. Let's watch the movement of the takeaway. Not too bad either. Nice shoulder turn, keeping the arm in close. The face of the club is going to right there bisect the hands. That's a very good classic takeaway move right there. The knees are still flexed. Head is still on the spine angle that he had it set up. Looks really good. And he comes up to the top of the backswing, and notice that the elbows are still within the triangle that he had it set up. What's nice about this view is that if the elbows are sprayed apart too far, you'll see him on either side of the red line. He's in a good position right there, and he should be able to route the club back down nicely to the golf ball. Let's see what happens here on routing the ball down. Just a little over the top. And there's where the head, that's the head going down and pushing of the right arm, rather than trying to route the club down and through like that. He's coming out and across. So you can see it right there, out and across. You see the club head now is way outside the hands. When the hands are here, we'd like to see the club back on this line, parallel to that trail arm. and he's not there. So that's an over-the-top cut. Has a tendency to hit the ball a little fat or thin, and slices it out to the right. So that's about all he has to work on is rerouting that club back on the same path that he had on the takeaway. One of the most advertised products on TV right now is called the Triangle 144. What he professes is that most tour players set up with the arms and shaft at 144 degree angle, and you can see this golfer's got that pretty well intact. Let's watch the takeaway, see if he stays on the yellow line. The hands do. The club's a little bit below, but not bad. As he's coming up to hand high, notice that the club just about blocks our view of the hands. That's really a good move. He's keeping his head down, his spine forward. Now he's got what we call an elbow up kind of a swing. That puts him in a position that's going to make it hard for him to reroute the club down. But let's see what he does. But by that I mean notice how far apart the elbows have gotten compared to where they were at setup. So he's going to start the club back down, and chances are he's going to be a little over the top. See, just a little bit. See how the hands are much higher than they were at setup? Several inches, as a matter of fact. So he's got to work on rerouting the club back to the apex of that angle at 144 degrees, so he's still there when he makes impact. And what happens is he's going to be cutting across the ball, which is either going to pull the ball or hit a high fade out to the right. And that's just all path, getting that club back onto the path that he wants based on his setup. Okay, let's look at the setup. One of the keys to a good setup is to make sure that the lead hip is more towards the target line than the lead shoulder. And you can see we have just the opposite here. So we've got to get him to be tilted a little bit more of his spine kind of on that line right there. Gets his head a little bit more behind the ball and gets him in a position to be able to turn behind the ball better. So let's get that out of the way. Let's watch the takeaway now. Now notice he's even moving more off the line. His butt needs to stay on that line. He's collapsing. He's not getting his weight transferred at all. And he's over swinging at the top of the backswing, so his lead arm is bending quite a bit. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that this knee that we're looking at here stays on that line. It doesn't drift outside of his feet. And then as he turns in, he can drive that right knee towards the target, and he doesn't get a chance to do that because it's so far offline that he can't get it there. Now notice he is able to get his hip in front of his shoulders at the impact position, but that's creating a lot of manipulation. He'll be better off if we can just get his setup to be a little bit more tilted away from the target so he can rotate the hips through. We know he can rotate because he did it there. So the parts are there, we just got to get him in the right sequence. Let's just watch what happens on the takeaway here. I drew this line at her shoulder level. What we'd like to see is the left shoulder drop down under that line on the way back. And it doesn't. Notice how everything's lifting up above the line to where she's almost getting her foot completely off the ground there. See that? So what we want to do is get her in a bent over position with her butt behind her, bent over at the hips, not at the waist, at the hips, so she can drive down. She's very strong and very athletic. She gets a good solid move into the ball, great lateral slide, really nice position there. Notice the right knee is turning in towards the target very nicely, right on through. I think she's going to find it easier to stay level if she can get into a little better setup position. I think her feet are a little too far apart. So if we were to take a look, let's say we just drew a square in here, nice little box. We started at the shoulders and went across the shoulders. You can see her feet are a little bit outside her shoulder width. Remember, the golf swing is a left to right motion and a right to left motion. No up and down ever in the golf swing. So we're going to work a little bit on that in the future. I think one of the keys to a great success is the position of the forearms. We need to get the lead forearm above the trail forearm from this angle. That squares the shoulders up to the target line. You can see that the shoulders are in pretty far to the right. This person's been hitting a high slice most of his golfing career, and it really comes from his setup. It says he's tried to do other things, but from this setup you can't. So the first one we'll have him do is get his right forearm higher than his left forearm, and he doesn't get it there until that far into the takeaway. Now his shoulders are square to his intended target line. His target line is that way. And notice that his setup is clearly, if we go back this way, is clearly over here someplace, parallel to his feet and his shoulders. So we got to get him to fix that. And then we're going to see if he can, because he's got good mechanics in his swing. Look at the position there. It's pretty good. Maybe a little too much bend in the lead arm, but not bad. Look how braced he is against the lead leg. That's a really, the trail leg. That's a really good position he's in there. Then he's going to drive into the shot. He's got the massive backswing, great flexibility, drives into the shot. But because of his original setup, he has to pull the ball to the right and hope for that nice high fade. I think we're just going to work on his setup a little bit and get him hitting the ball straight. First thing we're going to look at is the setup here. You can see that he's bent over a little too far. We'd like to see the spine at about 40 degrees, and he's quite a ways under that, which causes kind of an uncomfortable rounded back look, and makes it also very difficult for him to take the club back anywhere near the swing plane. I'll go ahead and draw the swing plane in here, at least part of it. Let's see how he does going back on the swing plane. See, he goes well underneath that swing plane right away, lifts up out. Now he actually gets his spine up to where it should be at setup, and he gets to the top of the backswing, and you can see the right elbow's out of the plane. He's not in a very good position there, and then he's going to dive back down low, and head's even coming further forward, so he's got a chance of just chunking it. And notice where the ball is. Let's get some of this stuff out of the way, and you'll see when he hits the ball, he's really catching it on the heel of the club. You can see that, how that club is catching it on the heel, almost on the hosel, right on through. So we're going to work on getting him a little taller and a little more relaxed in his golf swing. Here we have a good foundation for a setup. Spine angles between 30 and 40 degrees where it should be. Hands may be a little too far away from the thighs, but sometimes our anatomy creates the need to move our hands around, men and women both, the way we're made up. So let's watch the takeaway here. Let's see if she can get her right elbow on that upright line. Not bad. Look at that. Look at that. Pretty good move right there. She's actually over flexing the wrists, and you can see that the the left arm is bent. If the right arm was less bent, she would be straight up and down the spine angle line and be in a great shape. Great job of bracing against the trail leg. Let's watch the downswing now. Powers into the shot nicely, drops the whole body down. Not the head diving down, the whole body goes down. That's how it's supposed to be. Getting the club almost parallel to the trail forearm. Great position, nice laid off swing. She's going to power into the ball. What we need her to do now is get a little bit more action here. I'd like to see that right heel being pushed off the ground a little bit, forcing the rotation a little stronger, but she hits the ball a ton. A lot of potential in this golfer, and she has a good time doing it. Okay, let's watch the takeaway relative to the swing plane. That's our favorite line we see all the time. Notice that she's lifting her head up pretty high. What we want her to do is try to maintain that spine angle. So let's go ahead and clear this stuff out of the way, and we'll draw in the spine angle here. We want her to rotate on that line. Notice that she lifts way above that line. It's almost to the point where she's standing up. We see that with a lot of lady golfers, but she never gets back down to the golf ball, and that's why she's topping it. So the only way she's going to hit that ball solid is if she gets her spine back on the angle it was at setup.